The wind howled like something alive, clawing at the wooden cabin buried deep in the frozen forest. Snow slammed against the windows in frantic bursts, and for a long moment John Hale wondered if the storm outside was trying to swallow the world whole. He added another log to the fire. Sparks jumped, warm and gold, painting the room in soft light. This was his refuge, silent, distant, forgotten by everyone except the trees and the storms. After years of running from memories he no longer spoke about, solitude had become a kind of peace. Then he heard it, not the wind, not branches breaking. A voice, soft, fragile, almost erased by the storm. John froze. Nobody came out here. The nearest town was hours away. Grabbing his coat, he opened the door and the cold hit him like a blade. The snow blinded him at first, white, endless, devouring everything. Then he saw them. Two shapes collapsed near the tree line, too small to be hunters, too still to be animals. He sprinted through the snow, dropped to his knees, and brushed away the ice covering their bodies. Skin soft, cold as glass. Hair, silver, tangled with frost. Eyes closed, lashes frozen. Two girls, not human, light blue skin, faintly glowing veins, symbols etched across their necks like shimmering constellations, and both of them shaking in their sleep, breath shallow, almost gone. Hey, stay with me, John muttered, though he doubted they could hear. He lifted one onto each shoulder. They were impossibly light, like carrying snow itself. He pushed through the wind, kicked his door open, and brought them into the fire-lit warmth. Their bodies barely reacted when he wrapped them in thick blankets. He moved fast, water boiling, emergency heater humming, fire burning hotter. Minutes passed. Then a sound, a small, broken whisper. Police. John turned sharply. The younger one had opened her eyes, violet glowing faintly, reflecting the fire. She tried to lift her hand but couldn't. I've got you, he said softly. You're safe. Her lips parted again, but the older girl suddenly pulled her close in a protective motion. Her eyes opened next, alert despite exhaustion. She watched him with a mixture of fear and calculation, her hand trembling but ready to shield the other girl at any cost. It's okay, John said, voice low and steady. I'm not here to hurt you. They didn't understand the words, but they understood the tone. Slowly, the older girl relaxed a fraction. John brought warm water in a cup. They stared as if unsure what it was. He pressed it to the younger one's lips. She drank like she'd been starving for days. The older one followed, her eyes never leaving his face. They murmured to each other in a language soft and melodic. Fear tinged every sound. Food, John said. He opened a can of soup and poured it into bowls. The smell filled the small cabin, and their eyes tracked every motion, hunger breaking through their caution. The younger girl reached out with trembling hands. The older helped her hold the bowl. They ate slowly at first, then desperately, silently thanking him with their eyes. When they finished, exhaustion dragged them back down. The younger one leaned against the older. The older curled around her protectively. John added another blanket, and for the first time their shivering eased. Then, through the firelight, the older girl whispered a single word, soft, reverent. Cathari. It meant nothing to John, but the way she said it sent a prickle down his spine. She placed her hand gently on her sister's cheek and repeated it. Both of them looked at him. He didn't know what the word meant. But he knew something had shifted. The younger one reached out a cold, delicate hand. John hesitated, then took it. Her skin was icy, fragile, but her grip tightened weakly around his fingers. A silent exchange passed between them. Fear dissolving, trust forming, something deeper settling quietly into the room. The storm outside roared on. But inside, the warmth grew, not just from the fire, but from the fragile connection forming between three strangers who were no longer just strangers. They slept at last, curled beneath blankets like lost children found at the edge of the world. John sat nearby, unable to look away from their luminous hair softly glowing in the firelight. Morning came quietly, slipping through the cabin windows in pale, silver light. The storm had finally exhausted itself. Snow lay deep and clean across the world outside, untouched and glistening like crushed diamonds. John had barely slept. He sat in his old chair, watching the two alien girls breathing softly beneath his thickest blankets. They looked peaceful now, no longer shivering, no longer clinging to life by threads, just resting. Safe. The younger one stirred first. Her eyelids fluttered as though waking surprised her. She blinked at the ceiling, then at the fire, then slowly turned her gaze toward John. He smiled gently. Good morning. She didn't answer with words, but her violet eyes followed the warmth in his tone. She touched her lips thoughtfully, as if searching for language inside herself. A moment later, the older one awoke. Her movements were cautious but alert. She immediately checked her sister's forehead, shoulders, breathing. Only when satisfied did she look up at John and offer a tiny, hesitant nod. John pointed to himself. John. They exchanged looks. Then the older placed a hand on her chest. Reviva. She pointed to the younger. Zenari. John repeated softly, Revaz Zenari. Both relaxed slightly at hearing their names in his voice. Zenari, still weak but curious, sat upright. You save, she whispered, voice fragile but clear. John chuckled. Yeah, you two were about 1 hour from becoming ice sculptures. Zenari blinked, tilting her head. Ice pain. Reve approached the fire, kneeling beside it. She extended her hands toward the warmth, and the flames reflected off her glowing veins, creating ripples of color through her skin. John found himself staring, unable to decide if she looked alien or impossibly beautiful. He moved to the stove and began breakfast. Eggs, bread, nothing fancy, but the smell filled the cabin, warm and comforting. The sisters watched intently, Reva with sharp curiosity, Zenari with wide-eyed wonder. Zenari picked up the fork awkwardly, gripping it upside down. John took it gently, flipped it, and placed it back in her hand. Like this, he said. She mimicked his motion, then attempted a bite, eyes lighting up with surprise at the flavor. Reva copied with perfect precision, studying both her sister and John as though absorbing knowledge like light. After eating, Reva stood and slowly wandered the cabin, touching wooden walls with reverence. She examined tools, blankets, even John's coat hanging by the door. When she lifted it to her chest, he raised a brow. You cold again. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she stepped toward him, lifted the coat, and wrapped it carefully around his shoulders. A gift returned. Zenari approached next. She placed her hand, small, cool, over his heart. Warm, she murmured. You warm, ours not. John hesitated. Your people aren't warm-blooded. Reva sat down beside her sister. Our home, no fire, no sun, no warmth like this. We survive cold, but not strong. Zenari nodded softly. You give a fire touch. Not just body, soul. John swallowed. He wasn't mystical, never had been. He'd come to the woods to escape the world's nonsense. But the way they looked at him, as though he had given something sacred, made his chest feel strangely heavy. Later, while gathering wood outside, John saw something in the snow. Symbols. Curved lines, glowing faint blue, arranged in deliberate patterns. He crouched, brushing snow aside. The shapes pulsed faintly with warmth. He rushed inside. Reva. Zenari, did you draw something outside? Reva stepped forward. Yes, mark safe home for thanks. Zenari added quietly. Only done for protectors. John rubbed the back of his neck. I'm not a hero. Zenari shook her head, violet eyes bright. You are now. That evening, Reva folded blankets neatly while Zenari brought logs despite her trembling hands. When John sat by the fire, they settled beside him, close, not distant. Zenari rested her head against his arm. Reva placed her hand near his knee. No words, just closeness. John felt something he hadn't felt in years, peace, and something else he couldn't name. Later, Reva murmured something in her language. Zenari's eyes widened, then she looked at John with a soft, relieved smile. John frowned. What did she say? Reva hesitated, but answered. She say we no need to search anymore. John didn't sleep much that night. Their words echoed in his mind like a whisper he wasn't ready to understand. When morning finally came, the world outside glittered under weak sunlight. But the snow in front of the cabin held new shapes. More symbols, not random, a pattern. At the center, drawn in glowing lines, was a figure, a man, his jacket, his boots, and a bright mark over his chest. Reva and Zenari stepped beside him silently. Reva touched the glowing symbol over the heart. You are marked, she said softly. Marked, John repeated. Zenari nodded. When male give warmth to cold soul, leave mark, not on skin, on spirit. John stared, speechless. This is some kind of belief system. Reva shook her head. Not belief, truth. Zenari stepped closer. Bond rare, 1 in 1,000, fire chooses, we think it choose you. John opened his mouth to reply, something skeptical, something grounded, but then a sound tore through the forest. A deep mechanical hum, a red beam sweeping the trees, a ship scanning, Reva's face drained of color. They found us. Zenari grabbed his arm, trembling. Please hide, they take us back. John didn't hesitate. Down here. He pulled the rug aside, revealing his hidden trapdoor. The sisters slid inside without question. John followed and pulled it shut just as the red light passed over the cabin roof. In the dark, Reva whispered, If they see the stone, they call us broken, bonded to human forbidden. John glanced at her, Then we hide it. Zenari pressed something small and glowing into his palm. No, keep. If anything happen, you hold bonds still. Above them, heavy boots thudded against the floorboards. Voices, cold, metallic, spoke in a harsh language. John wrapped an arm around Zenari as she shook silently. Reva clutched her hand, whispering calming words. Minutes felt like hours. The scan passed, curses, footsteps retreating, engines rising, then silence. When they finally climbed out, the cabin was ransacked, but 3 days passed in uneasy quiet. No ships, no red scanners, no metallic voices demanding surrender. Just the slow drip of melting snow from the roof, the constant hum of the cabin's heater, and the soft sound of 2 alien sisters learning, for the first time, what it meant to live without fear. Reva hummed while she peeled vegetables at the small wooden counter. Her voice was low and strange, but somehow comforting. Zenari swept the floor in gentle, careful motions, treating the simple broom as though it were something sacred. John watched them from his chair, still trying to understand how his lonely, broken life had transformed into this: warmth, movement, light. He'd lived alone for years. Now he had 2 radiant beings filling his cabin with soft laughter and glowing touches. But something else had changed too. They stayed close to him. Reva often paused behind his chair, brushing imaginary dust from his shoulders like a quiet guardian. Zenari sat beside him at night, leaning her head gently against his knee. The first time she did it, John thought she was cold. The second time he understood, she simply felt safe there. On the 4th morning, he stepped outside to chop wood. Dawn was still pale, the world a frozen painting. His breath steamed in the air as he raised the axe. Then everything went silent. The forest usually shifted with distant sounds, birds, wind, the creak of ancient trees. But now it was utterly still, too still. John lowered the axe. Something's wrong. As he turned toward the cabin, a faint vibration rippled through the snow under his boots. Not thunder, not wind, engines. He dropped the axe and sprinted inside. Reva, Zenari. The sisters froze. Zenari dropped the wooden cup she was holding. It shattered on the floor. Reva's voice trembled. They come. John yanked the rug aside, revealing the trapdoor. Down now. The sisters climbed inside, their hands shaking so violently Zenari nearly slipped. John jumped in after them, pulling the trapdoor shut just as a deep, mechanical hum filled the air above the cabin. The bunker was dark and cramped. The only light came from faint blue veins glowing under Reva's skin and the trembling shimmer in Zenari's eyes. Zenari pressed close to John, gripping the fabric of his shirt. They take us. They always take us. John wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Not this time. Up above, heavy boots thudded across the wooden floorboards. Metallic voices followed. This territory under scan, return marked subjects to owner authority. Reva's whisper was barely breath. They kill who stand between. John's jaw tightened. Yeah, well, they'll have to try. A hiss-click sound vibrated overhead. A scanner activating. Red light bled faintly through the cracks in the floorboards. Zenari whimpered. Reva clutched her sister's hand and pressed a small, glowing disc between their palms. Shield pulse, she murmured. Block scan, only 10 seconds. The bunker suddenly flashed blue, light rippling like water across the walls, then plunged back into darkness. The red scan flickered, confused, then passed. Boots shifted. Voices cursed. Finally, the engines roared to life and faded into the sky. Only when the last sound vanished did John push open the trapdoor. The cabin was a wreck, but not burned, tossed, searched, but intact. He turned to the girls as they crawled out after him. Reva's voice shook. You are not just protector, you are part of us. John exhaled. I didn't sign up for any alien laws. Zenari stepped forward, took his hand, and placed it against her chest. But you follow them anyway. John didn't pull away. Later that evening, as the fire flickered quietly, Zenari and Reva knelt on the floor, arranging strange, glowing objects in a bowl of water. A soft blue flame hovered above it. John watched from his chair. What are you two doing? Reva lifted her eyes, truth speaking. She held something in both hands, 2 stones, one blue as frozen starlight, one red as fire. Both glowing faintly, Zenari rose beside her, eyes full of emotion. John, she whispered, we wish to choose. Reva stepped closer. You save us when we were no one. You give warmth, food, safety. You give freedom. Zenari nodded. You give names, choice, life. John felt heat rise in his throat. I just did what anyone. No, Reva said gently. Not anyone, you rare. She placed the stones on the table between them. Twin stone union, sister bond. We choose you as mate. John froze. Mates, you're talking about marriage. Rivet gave a soft, hopeful nod. Together our way, our law. Zenari leaned forward, voice trembling. You may refuse. If refuse, we leave. Not stay, we're not wanted. Wait, no, John stepped forward. I don't want you to go. Rivet placed a cool hand on his chest. Then let us stay, not as strangers, not as burden, as yours. The words pressed into him like the sun rose pale and quiet, casting long blue shadows over the forest. For the first time in weeks, the sky was clear. No storm, no humming engines, no red scans sweeping the snow. John almost believed they were safe. Rivet was planting glowing blue flowers in small bowls of snow, humming softly. Zenari knelt beside the fire, tracing swirling patterns on the wooden floor with gentle fingertips. Ritual marks for protection, she'd said. The cabin felt alive, warm, almost like a home shared by three souls, but peace has a way of breaking without warning. A sound cracked the air, a deep, savage boom that rattled snow from the branches. John's head snapped upward. No clouds. No storm, just a dark shape cutting through the morning sky. Then the ship descended, sharp, metallic, predatory. Larger than any he'd seen before, its underbelly glowing crimson, engines roaring like distant thunder. It didn't glide. It ruled the air, dominating everything beneath it. Rivet stood so quickly she nearly stumbled. Enforcer, she whispered. Zenari's voice broke. No, not her. John stepped outside, rifle forgotten inside. Instinct, raw and human, pushed him forward. The ship hovered above the tree line, then extended a long metallic platform that slammed into the snow. A woman stepped out. At least she looked like one, tall, terrifyingly composed, her silver armor shifting like living bone. Her eyes burned gold. Her presence alone made the freezing air feel sharper. Rivet swallowed. She is Vice. Zenari gripped John's arm. She does not take orders, she is the order. Vice walked across the snow without leaving footprints, every step deliberate. When she stopped 10 feet from John, the air tightened, as though reality itself braced for her words. You. Her voice was cold enough to cut stone. Human male, step forward. John did. You hold what does not belong to you. I gave them shelter, he said. They were dying. They were marked property, Vice replied. Their escape violates sovereign rule. Your interference is punishable. John clenched his jaw. They're not property. Vice tilted her head, assessing him like a scientist evaluating an anomaly. Do you know what becomes of humans who break our claim laws? No, John said steady, but you're welcome to explain. Vice almost smiled. You misunderstand. I do not need to kill you, not if you return them now. Rivet stepped out of the cabin. She not take us. Zenari appeared right behind her, trembling but determined. He not choose, we choose. Vice blinked once, slowly. You invoke the bond. Rivet lifted her chin. Twinstone union by ancient law. That law, Vice said quietly, is dead, like the bloodline it served. Zenari pulled something from behind her back, a glowing stone. Then we die bonded. Vice reached for the weapon at her hip. Then froze. Her gold eyes narrowed, focusing on John. She stepped closer, not threatening, but studying. You carry it, she whispered. John frowned. Carry what? Rivet looked confused. Vice, what you sense. Vice circled him, eyes analyzing, dissecting. Soul heat, forbidden warmth, the heartfire lineage. She stopped directly in front of him. I did not believe it still existed. John stared back at her. What the hell does that mean? Rivet inhaled sharply. Heartfire was healer caste. Extinct for ages. Vice's eyes were cold fire. He breaks chains without touching them. He melts fear without speaking. He makes the claimed choose. She stepped back slowly. That makes him more dangerous than any weapon. Zenari reached for John's sleeve, voice trembling. We ready to run, if you want run with us. John stepped in front of both sisters. No one is running. Vice watched him and something shifted in her expression. Respect, fear, memory. Finally, she pulled a metallic badge from her belt and dropped it into the snow. Then you are no longer my target. Rivet gasped, you abandon law. Vice looked at John. I serve truth. Today truth says they are no longer claimable. She turned toward her ship. But others are coming, less mercy, more fire, prepare. Then like a shadow dissolving in sunlight, she was gone, her ship rising into the sky and vanishing in seconds. Silence fell hard. Rivet's strength broke all at once. She collapsed against John's chest. Zenari clung to him from the other side. You fight, Rivet whispered, voice shaking, not with bull. Night fell unnaturally fast. The forest grew still, too still. No wind, no cracking branches, no distant hum of wildlife. Only silence, the kind that settles before a storm powerful enough to change the shape of the world. Inside the cabin, John packed gear with steady, controlled movements. Batteries, coils of wire, old mining charges he hadn't touched in years. Each piece clinked like the ticking of a countdown. Reva and Zenari helped quietly. No panic now, only grim acceptance. They had lived their whole lives in fear. Tonight felt different. Tonight they had something worth defending. They won't accept what Vice did, Reva said softly. Her mercy is rebellion. Zenari hugged the bonding stones to her chest. They come to erase bond, erase us. John tightened the strap on a homemade explosive. Then we'll give them a welcome they'll never forget. A small burst of static crackled from the old radio. John froze. Zenari stepped closer. Reva's eyes sharpened. Then a voice, distorted, cold, mechanical, cut through the static. Human cabin identified. Illegal bond confirmed. Arrival in 6 minutes. Level 3 cleansing upon landing. A cleansing order. John's blood chilled, but not with fear, with anger. He turned to the sisters. To the bunker now. Reva shook her head. You die alone if we leave. You'll die if you stay, he said. Please trust me one last time. Zenari's eyes filled with tears. You say trust, we trust. She pressed her forehead to his chest. Do not fall. He cupped her cheek gently, then motioned for them to climb down. They disappeared beneath the trapdoor. He closed it, locked it, covered it. Then he stood alone in the middle of the cabin. He picked up the silver disc Reva had placed on his chest the night before, a small alien charm that now pulsed like a heartbeat. John pressed a burning coal to the center. The metal shimmered, glowing red. Not a shield, not a weapon. A promise. Outside, the forest trembled. The sky cracked open. 4 ships descended. They landed in a square formation surrounding the cabin. Snow exploded outward under the force of their engines. Dozens of armored soldiers stepped out, their eyes and masks glowing crimson. John stepped outside. Snow crunched beneath his boots. The ship's lights washed him in red. He stood tall. A commander taller than the rest, cloaked in dark armor, stepped forward. Human male, the commander announced, voice amplified. You bonded with 2 escaped females of the Zari line. This is violation. They weren't property, John said. They were dying. That does not matter. Return them now. No, the commander lifted a small transmitter. Then cleansing begins. He pressed the device. The ground erupted. Boom, boom, boom. Mines John had planted days ago exploded one after another, fire ripping through the snow. Soldiers flew backward. Trees shattered. Sonic flares detonated, screaming through the clearing. Chaos swallowed the world. John dove behind a pile of logs, firing his rifle. One shot, another precise, deadly, but there were too many. A plasma bolt grazed his arm, searing through his jacket. Another blast splintered the shed beside him. He rolled behind cover, heart pounding, blood dripping in the snow. Above all the noise, he heard something worse. Zenari's muffled cry through the floorboards. Reva's desperate whisper. Stay hidden, he begged under his breath. Please. But the soldiers kept coming. One approached from John's blind side. Weapon raised. A blue flash cut the night. Reva's disc, thrown from the cabin door, hit the soldier's armor and exploded in a burst of electric light. He collapsed instantly. John, Zenari screamed. They had come out against his orders, against survival. Zenari ran through gunfire, grabbed John's arm and dragged him behind thicker cover. You fool, she cried. You die for us. I was trying to keep you alive. You alive with us, she said, voice shaking. Or nothing. Reva knelt beside them, hands glowing as she pressed them to John's bleeding arm. Her healing warmth spread through him like water over fire. The commander stepped forward again. Final warning, surrender the bonded. Reva rose slowly, lifting both glowing stones. No, we choose him. Zenari joined her. And if we die, she whispered, we die as his. The commander laughed, a cold, cruel sound echoing across the clearing. That bond means nothing. A thunderous voice cut the sky in half. It does to me. Everyone looked up. Clouds split as a massive warship descended, sleek black, carved in red light. A shadow larger than any of the 4 enemy ships combined. John knew that voice, Varys, the enforcer who had spared them. Her ship hovered above the clearing like a god descending to Earth. Varys' voice boomed again. The human is under my protection, so are the bonded. Dozens of drones dropped from her ship, each armed, each glowing. The enemy commander stepped backward, shocked. You break protocol, Varys. I follow truth, Varys said. You follow fear. The clearing froze. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the commander signaled retreat. The soldiers fled into their ships. Engines roared, lights vanished, and in seconds, they were gone. Silence returned again, soft, fragile, snow drifting down like falling ashes. Snow drifted softly through the air, settling over a forest that looked newly born after the battle's fire and fury. Smoke rose in thin, fading ribbons from scorched earth where the mines had detonated. The clearing that had been a war zone minutes ago was now wrapped in a fragile, trembling peace. Jon stood in the center of it, all exhausted, bleeding, breath shallow, but alive. Reva wrapped an arm around his waist, steadying him. Zenari cupped his jaw gently, her glowing violet eyes filled with tears that refused to fall. You hurt, Zenari whispered. Jon managed a crooked smile. Just a little. Reva pressed her glowing palms to the worst of his wounds, her healing energy warm and soothing. You fight storms, soldiers, death itself, she murmured. You fight everything alone. Jon shook his head. Not alone, not anymore. Above them, Varys' massive warship hovered like a silent guardian. Snow glittered in its red underlights. The ramp lowered and Varys descended, armor scratched from battle, expression unreadable. She approached slowly, eyes sweeping over the sisters, then Jon. You should be dead, Varys said. Jon shrugged. I get that a lot. Zenari glared at Varys, protective. He lived because we stay, because bond true. Reva lifted her chin. You saw truth, you said it. Varys studied them for a long moment. I did, she admitted, and I stand by it. She turned toward Jon. Your fire, your warmth, your instinct to protect, it is something my people have forgotten. And something they fear. It threatens everything they built on obedience. Jon crossed his arms, ignoring the pain. So what now? They'll come back. Varys nodded. Yes, stronger, relentless, but not today. She stepped closer, voice lowering. You three must leave this place. The forest is no longer safe. Your bond is sacred to them, not because they honor it, but because they want to erase it. Zenari grabbed Jon's sleeve, panic rising. Leave, where go? We only know here. Reva touched her sister's hand. Our home was not home, only cage. And this, Zenari whispered, voice breaking, pressing her forehead to Jon's chest. This the first warm place we ever know. Jon held her close, eyes burning despite the cold. Varys lifted her chin. You can run, hide, fight, but whatever you choose. She hesitated just a fraction. I will not hunt you. It was the closest thing to a blessing an enforcer could give. Without another word, Varys returned to her ship. The engines roared softly, lifting it upward. Snow spiraled around them in a red-lit storm until the ship pierced the clouds and vanished. Silence settled, deep, final. Reva and Zenari turned to Jon, waiting, holding their breath. He looked from one to the other. Their silver hair sparkled with falling snow. Their glowing eyes held a depth he couldn't begin to understand. They were fragile and fierce, terrified and brave, wounded and yet more alive than anyone he'd ever known. They had chosen him, chosen this, chosen each other, chosen a future no law or empire had prepared them for. Jon took a slow breath. Hey, he said softly, barely above a whisper. Both of you look at me. Reva stepped closer. Zenari's fingers tangled with his. You keep saying I saved you. He shook his head gently. But the truth is, you saved me. Zenari blinked, confused. How? I came to this forest because I had nothing left, no purpose, no fire inside me. He looked at them, really looked. But you brought warmth back. You made this place feel alive again. Reva's eyes softened, glowing faintly in the dim light. You speak heart truth. Jon stepped closer, placing a hand on each of their cheeks. And I'm not letting anyone take either of you away. Zenari's breath hitched. Reva's hands rose to hold his wrists gently. So, Jon whispered, voice steady now. About that union you offered. Zenari gasped, hope blazing across her face. Reva's lips parted, trembling with emotion. Jon smiled softly. I don't know your rituals, I don't know your laws, but if you want me, really want me. Reva nodded instantly. We want with all life. Zenari whispered, You ours if you wish be. Jon exhaled, warm clouds forming in the cold air. I choose you, he said, both of you. Zenari let out a small, broken laugh of relief. Reva closed her eyes for a moment, overwhelmed. They each reached into the small cloth pouch at their waists. 2 stones emerged, one red, one blue, twin lights glowing like tiny suns in their palms. Together they held them out. Jon didn't hesitate. He took both stones in his hands. The moment he touched them, heat bloomed through his chest, warm, bright, powerful, not burning, not painful. Alive, the stones glowed brighter. Zenari and Rava stepped closer, pressing their foreheads gently to his shoulders. A soft hum filled the air. The forest brightened with faint alien light. The bond was sealed, not by law, not by force, but by choice. When the glow faded, the three of them stood in the clearing, snow falling softly around them, hearts beating in unison beneath a quiet winter sky. Rava lifted her head. Zenari took